Fleas and Rats. You can click on the link. Black Death, European Tour, 1347 to 1351. Black Death was one of 3 diseases that killed 1/3 of Europe's population. It is believed the plague originated in Asia and moved west with Mongol armies and traders. Its path of death was generally from south to north and east to west. It infected all of Europe within 5 years. How it was transmitted. Flea drinks rat blood that carries the bacteria. Bacteria multiply in the flea's gut. Gut clogged with bacteria. Flea bites human, regurgitates the blood into an open wound, and the human is infected. The bubonic plague was the most common form of the Black Death. The mortality rate was 30 to 75%. The symptoms were enlarged and inflamed lymph nodes around armpits, neck, and groin. The term bubonic refers to the characteristics bubo or enlarged lymphatic gland. Victims were subject to headaches, nausea, aching joints, fever of 101 to 105 degrees, vomiting, and a general feeling of illness. Symptoms took from 1 to 7 days to appear. The pneumonic plague was the second most commonly seen form of the Black Death. The pneumonic plague infected the lungs. Symptoms took 1 to 7 days to appear. The mortality rate for the pneumonic plague was 90 to 95%. If treated today, the mortality rate would only be 5 to 10%. The septicemic plague was the most rare form of all. The mortality was close to 100%. Even today, there is no treatment. Symptoms were a high fever and skin turning deep shades of purple due to disseminated intravascular coagulation. In its most deadly form, DIC can cause a victim's skin to turn dark purple. The Black Death got its name from the deep purple, almost black discoloration. Victims usually died the same day symptoms appeared. In some cities, as many as 800 people died every day. Who do you call? People in the 17th century did not know what caused the plague, and many believed it was a punishment from God. They did realize that coming into contact with those infected increased the risk of contracting the disease yourself. Cures and preventative measures were not at all effective. Many doctors, knowing that they could do nothing for plague victims, simply didn't bother trying to treat the disease. Others took interesting precautionary measures. They wore a mask, they had a gown, a leather hat, glass eye, a beak, a wooden stick, leather gloves, and full-length boots. The plague doctor. The beak that was attached to the mask was stuffed with herbs, perfumes, or spices to purify the air that the doctor breathed when he was close to victims. The stick is for poking the patient and for warding off those who got too close. The hat was made of leather. It was worn to show that the man was a doctor and also to add extra protection to his head. Suggested preventions and cures. How they were supposed to work and what they actually did. So if you carried flowers or wear a strong perfume, the smells would help to ward away the disease, and they actually did nothing. If you drank hot drinks, the victim would then sweat out the disease. It did nothing. If you carried a lucky charm, the charm would ward off the disease. That did nothing. Use leeches to bleed the victim. They look like a little slug. They live in the water. This would remove infected blood. It did nothing. You could smoke a pipe of tobacco. The smoke would ward off the disease. Nothing. Give a strong dose of laxatives. This would cause the victim to completely empty his bowels, thus removing the disease. Strong doses of laxatives can cause death from dehydration. Or the last one was to coat the victims with mercury and place them in the oven. The combination of mercury and heat from the oven would kill off the disease. This could actually increase the likelihood of death. Mercury is poisonous, and the heat from the oven caused serious burns. Effect on economy. The economy was probably hit the hardest of all the aspects of Europe. The biggest problem was that valuable artisan skills disappeared when large numbers of the working class died. Therefore, those who had skills became even more valuable than the rich people. The society structure began to change, giving formerly poor laborers more say. Cause and effect. Cause: a terrifying disease called Black Death imported from China and spread to Europe. Effect: over 125 million people dead and the population went down the toilet. Effect: peasants are starting to rebel because they have to work twice as hard. Effect: the feudal system broke down because there was no more knights or anything. The medieval church. One of the groups that suffered the most was the Christian church. It lost prestige, spiritual authority, and the leadership of the people. The church promised cures, treatment, and an explanation for the plague. They said it was God's will, but the reason for this awful punishment was unknown. People wanted answers, but the priests and bishops didn't have any. The clergy abandoned their Christian duties and fled. People prayed to God and begged for forgiveness. After the plague ended, angry and frustrated villagers started to revolt against the church. The survivors were also enraged at doctors who didn't cure patients but said they could. People's attitudes towards music and art changed as they began to see the depression surrounding them. The horrific nature of the Black Death was reflected in the realistic depictions of human suffering and carnage. Citizens of Tournai bury plague victims. These are fortunate to have coffins. Most victims were interred in mass graves. As well as an imagery of the skeleton. Music. Before the Black Death, music was happy and frequently heard. During the Black Death, music was played very grimly or never played at all. The somber change in art and music demonstrated the grim reality of the world around them. You have been singing about the Black Death your whole lives. That would be the song Ring Around the Rosie. The symptoms of the plague included a rosy red rash in the shape of a ring on the skin. Pockets and pouches were filled with sweet-smelling herbs, or posies, which were carried due to the belief that the disease was transmitted by bad smells. The term ashes, ashes refers to the cremation of the dead bodies. The death rate was over 60%, and the plague was only halted by the Great Fire of London in 1666, which killed the rats which carried the disease, which was transmitting via water sources. Ring around the rosy, a pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down. Brain pop. If you have trouble getting in, here is the info again. Username, HMS 1639. Password, HMS at 1639. And the link is below.